This happened last summer, and I'm still processing the absolute chaos that unfolded. Fair warning, this is going to be a long story, but the payoff is absolutely worth it. Also, throwaway account for obvious reasons. Some background: I'm 32F, and this story involves my ex-fiancé, David, 34M. We were together for 4 years, lived together for 2, and were supposed to get married in June 2019. I say supposed to because 3 weeks before our wedding, David completely vanished from my life. And when I say vanished, I mean vanished. One day we were having a normal Tuesday morning coffee discussing last-minute wedding details and kissing me goodbye before work, and then he just disappeared.
Didn't come home that night.
Didn't answer his phone.
Didn't respond to texts.
His car was gone from the parking lot at his office. His coworkers said he'd left early, and that was it. At first, I thought something terrible had happened. I called hospitals, filed a police report, contacted his family. His parents were as confused as I was. They'd just sent in their RSVP cards and bought plane tickets. His sister had already purchased her bridesmaid dress. The police treated it as a missing person case for about 48 hours, until David's credit card showed purchases in another state. It took me 3 days to piece together what had actually happened. David hadn't been kidnapped or hurt. He'd planned an elaborate escape from our entire relationship. He'd apparently been slowly moving money from our joint savings account for weeks. He'd taken personal items from our apartment bit by bit. He'd even called the wedding venue and canceled everything, forging my signature on the cancellation forms. The worst part? I found out from the caterer. The fucking caterer called me to confirm the cancellation, and that's how I learned that the man I was supposed to marry in 18 days had decided he'd rather disappear than have an adult conversation about not wanting to get married. The aftermath was devastating. We'd already sent invitations, people had made travel arrangements, I'd taken time off work, spent thousands of dollars on a dress, booked a honeymoon. But more than the logistics, it was the complete betrayal of trust. For years of my life, and he couldn't even give me the courtesy of a breakup conversation. I spent the next year in therapy, rebuilding my life, and trying to process what the hell had happened. David never contacted me. Not once. He didn't come back for his stuff, which I eventually donated, didn't respond to emails, didn't acknowledge my existence. Through mutual friends, I heard he'd moved across the country and was working at some tech startup, but that was it. The mutual friends were complicated. Most of them were sympathetic to me, obviously, but David had been well-liked in our social circle. Some people felt awkward choosing sides, others made excuses for him like, maybe he just wasn't ready, or it's better than getting divorced later. A few people actually defended his right to change his mind, as if leaving your fiancé via disappearing act 3 weeks before the wedding was just a normal relationship decision. Fast forward to 2023. I'm in a much better place mentally. I've been dating someone wonderful for about a year, and we recently got engaged. My new fiancé, Jake, knows the whole David story and has been incredibly supportive and understanding about my trust issues and wedding anxiety. Jake and I decided to buy a house together, and we closed on this beautiful place in March. It needed some work, but by summer we'd transformed it into our dream home. We decided to throw a housewarming party in July, nothing fancy, just a casual gathering to show off the house and celebrate our engagement. Now, here's where I made what some might call a questionable decision. I invited everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Old college friends, work colleagues, family, neighbors, and yes, all our mutual friends from the David era, including David himself. Jake thought I was crazy, but I insisted it was about closure and moving forward. I told him I wanted to show everyone how well I was doing, how happy we were, and that I held no grudges. Very mature, very evolved, very living my best life. That's what I told Jake, anyway. The truth was more complicated. See, over the years, I'd kept in touch with some of David's friends and family members. Not in a stalky way, but social media makes it hard to completely cut ties with people you genuinely liked who happen to be connected to your ex. Through these connections, I'd learned some interesting things about David's version of our breakup. According to David, our relationship had been toxic and codependent. He claimed I was emotionally manipulative and that he'd felt trapped for months before the wedding. He told people that I'd pressured him into proposing, that I'd been controlling about wedding planning, and that leaving was the only way he could escape an abusive situation. Most creatively, David had completely rewritten the history of our relationship. He claimed we'd been basically broken up for months before the wedding, that we'd had multiple conversations about calling it off, and that his disappearance was just the final step in a mutual decision to end things. He made it sound like I was some delusional ex who couldn't accept that the relationship was over. This revisionist history was particularly galling because David had been an enthusiastic participant in our relationship right up until he vanished. He'd been excited about the wedding, actively involved in planning, talking about our future together. 3 days before he disappeared, he'd posted a lovey-dovey Instagram story about being excited to marry his best friend and soulmate. But apparently, none of that fit his new narrative. The worst part was that some people believed him. When you disappear without explanation, people fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. David's story sounded plausible to people who didn't know the full context, especially since I wasn't exactly eager to relitigate the details of my most traumatic relationship experience with casual acquaintances. So when I decided to invite David to the housewarming, it wasn't really about closure or moving on. It was about setting the record straight. I wasn't sure David would actually come. He'd moved back to our city about 6 months earlier for work, which is how I knew he was local again. He'd been slowly reintegrating into our old social circle, showing up at group events and parties. I'd managed to avoid him so far, but I knew we'd eventually end up at the same gathering. When I sent out the invitations, I made sure David's was particularly casual and friendly. "Hey David, Jake and I are throwing a housewarming party at our new place. Would love to celebrate this new chapter with old friends.
Hope to see you there."
My name. To my surprise, he RSVP'd yes. Either he was genuinely curious about my new life, or he was confident enough in his revisionist history that he didn't think I'd contradict it publicly. Maybe he thought showing up would prove his point about us being basically broken up for months. Like, look how mature and friendly we can be now. I spent weeks preparing for this party. Not just the normal party prep, but some very specific preparations that Jake knew nothing about. I told him I was working on a surprise element for the party, something special to mark this new chapter in our lives. The party was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in July. We'd invited about 50 people, and most had said they'd come. I spent the morning setting up, arranging food, decorating the backyard, and generally making everything look perfect. Jake was handling the bar setup and music, completely unaware of what I had planned. People started arriving around 2 p.m., and the party was going great. Everyone was complimenting the house, congratulating us on our engagement, having a good time. David showed up around 3 p.m., fashionably late, looking confident and relaxed. He brought a bottle of wine and gave me a casual hug like we were old friends who'd simply lost touch. "Congratulations on the house," he said, smiling. "And the engagement, of course. You look great." "Thanks, David," I replied sweetly. "I'm so glad you could make it. There's beer in the cooler, wine on the kitchen counter. Make yourself at home." For the next hour, I watched David work the party like he'd never broken my heart and disappeared from my life. He was charming, friendly, telling people about his new job and his apartment. When people asked about our past relationship, he'd give this rueful smile and say something like, "Oh, we're ancient history. Water under the bridge. I'm just happy to see her so settled and happy." A few people who knew the real story of our breakup looked uncomfortable with David's casual demeanor, but nobody said anything. This was my party, my house, and if I was okay with him being there, they were going to cause drama. Around 4:30 p.m., when most of the guests had arrived and everyone had a drink in hand, I decided it was time for my surprise element. I asked Jake to turn down the music and got everyone's attention. "Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to celebrate our new home with us. Jake and I are so grateful to have such amazing friends and family in our lives." Everyone smiled and raised their glasses, expecting a standard thank you toast. You know, this house represents a lot of things to us. It's our first home together, it's where we'll start our married life, and it's really a symbol of new beginnings. But I think new beginnings are especially meaningful when you can acknowledge and appreciate where you came from. I could see David across the patio, still smiling but looking slightly puzzled by the direction of my speech. I've learned so much about myself through all my relationships, the good ones and the challenging ones. Every person I've loved has taught me something important, and I want to honor that tonight. So, I have a little surprise for everyone. I walked over to a table I'd set up in the corner, covered with a decorative cloth. Underneath were about a dozen wrapped packages, each about the size of a picture frame. I've put together some memory gifts for the people here who've been part of my romantic journey. Think of it as a celebration of personal growth and the experiences that shaped me into the person Jake fell in love with. Jake looked confused, but was smiling gamely. A few people were starting to look intrigued. David's expression had shifted to something more wary. So, I'm going to hand out these little memory packages, and I hope you'll appreciate them for what they are. Honest acknowledgments of our shared history. I started with some of the easier ones. I gave packages to a couple of guys I'd casually dated in college who were at the party with their wives. Inside were cute, harmless photos of us at college parties or events with little notes like, "Thanks for teaching me that I actually like hiking," or "You were right about that restaurant, still my favorite." Everyone was laughing and enjoying the novelty of it. The casual dates were good sports about it. Their wives thought it was funny and sweet, and it all seemed like a quirky but harmless party activity. Then I got to the more serious relationships. I gave a package to Mark, who I'd dated for about a year after college. His gift was a photo of us at his sister's wedding, where he'd gotten blackout drunk and I'd had to drive him home. The note said, "Thanks for teaching me that I deserve a partner who can handle their alcohol at family events." Mark laughed nervously, but it was still within the bounds of acceptable party humor. His current girlfriend raised an eyebrow but didn't seem too bothered. Then I got to David's package. "David," I said, walking over to where he was standing with his beer, suddenly looking much less comfortable. "I saved something special for you." The entire party was watching now. You could feel the energy shift as people realized this wasn't just a cute, quirky activity anymore. I handed him a wrapped package, significantly larger than the others. "Go ahead, open it." David's hands were visibly shaking as he unwrapped it. Inside was an 8 by 10 framed collage. But this wasn't just any photo collage. I'd spent weeks putting together a comprehensive visual timeline of our entire relationship, with particular focus on the last few months before our wedding. There were photos of David looking happy and excited at our engagement party. Screenshots of his social media posts about being excited to marry me. Photos of us apartment hunting together, picking out wedding decorations, him trying on his tuxedo. But the centerpiece of the collage was a photo I'd taken of David just 3 days before he disappeared. We'd gone to brunch with friends to discuss bachelor party plans, and he was practically glowing talking about our honeymoon. In the photo, he's mid-sentence, gesturing excitedly, clearly in love and looking forward to our future together. At the bottom of the collage was a timeline with dates and captions. March 15th, David posts on Instagram about being excited to marry his best friend and soulmate. May 20th, David and my name, tour wedding venue for final walkthrough. David requests upgrade to premium bar package. May 30th, David tries on tuxedo, posts Instagram story about "Can't wait to see my bride in 3 weeks." June 2nd, David goes to work and never comes home. The entire party had gone dead silent. David was staring at the collage with his face getting redder by the second. But I wasn't done. "The note is on the back," I said cheerfully. David reluctantly flipped over the frame. In my sweetest handwriting, I'd written, "Dear David, thank you for teaching me that actions speak louder than words, and that someone can look you in the eye and tell you they love you while planning to abandon you. Thanks for showing me that some people would rather disappear than have difficult conversations. And most of all, thanks for demonstrating that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. I'm so grateful that I learned these lessons before I married you instead of after. Here's to honest communication and genuine commitment. XOXO." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. David was staring at the note, his face cycling through multiple shades of red and purple. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression that was part shock, part fury, and part something that might have been shame. "This is He started, then stopped. Why would you do this? Do what? I asked innocently. I'm just sharing memories of our relationship. You've told so many people about how we were basically broken up for months before the wedding and how you felt trapped in a toxic relationship. I thought it would be nice to provide some visual context for those claims. That's when things got really interesting, because it became clear that David had told different versions of our breakup story to different people, and now they were all in the same place comparing notes. His friend Mike spoke up first. Wait, David, I thought you said you guys had talked about calling off the wedding? That it was mutual? David's face went even redder. It's complicated. Because this, said my friend Sarah, pointing at the collage, doesn't look like someone who is planning to leave. That Instagram post is from 3 days before you disappeared. You disappeared? Asked David's coworker, who apparently had heard a different version of the story. I thought you said you had a big fight and decided to take a break. That's not what you told me, chimed in his friend Alex. You said she was emotionally abusive and you had to escape. I watched with fascination as David's carefully crafted revisionist history crumbled in real time. Different people started sharing the different versions of our breakup they'd heard from David, and none of them matched up with each other or with the evidence I'd presented. The worst part for David was that several people at the party had been at our engagement party, had seen us together in the weeks before the wedding, had witnessed his enthusiasm firsthand. My evidence wasn't just convincing, it was undeniable. David, said his own sister, who had flown in for our wedding and lost money on plane tickets, you told me that you guys had been fighting for months, and that she knew you were having doubts. But I was here for Easter, remember? 2 months before the wedding? You spent the whole weekend talking about honeymoon plans. David looked around the party desperately, as if searching for an ally or an escape route. But he was surrounded by people who now realized he'd been lying to them about our relationship, our breakup, and probably other things too. Look, he finally said, his voice strained. This is all taken out of context. Relationships are complicated. People can seem happy on the surface, but be struggling privately. That's true, I said reasonably. People do struggle privately sometimes. But you weren't struggling privately, David. You were posting on social media about how excited you were to marry me. You were making plans for our future. You were actively participating in wedding preparations. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Actually, let me share some more context. I'd screenshotted David's social media posts from our entire relationship, but especially the last few months. I started reading them aloud. April 10th. 2 months until I marry my best friend. Still can't believe she said yes. April 25th. Wedding planning is stressful, but doing it with this amazing woman makes everything worth it. May 15th. Picked up my tuxedo today.
Getting real now.
Can't wait to see my beautiful bride walk down the aisle. With each post I read, David looked smaller and more deflated. The contrast between his public declarations of love and excitement and his sudden disappearance was stark and undeniable. May 30th, I continued, just 3 days before you vanished. Last weekend as an unmarried man. So grateful for everyone who supported us on this journey. See you all at the altar. And then, my personal favorite, posted at 11:47 p.m. on June 1st, less than 12 hours before you disappeared forever. Can't sleep. Too excited about marrying the love of my life in 2.5 weeks. Hashtag blessed, hashtag almost husband, hashtag can't wait to make it happen. The party was still dead silent except for my voice reading David's own words back to him. When I finished, I looked up at him with a sweet smile. So, David, I'm curious. At what point between 11:47 p.m. on June 1st and 8 a.m. on June 2nd when you left for work and never came home did our relationship become toxic and essentially over? Because that's quite a transformation in about 8 hours. David opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. His friend Mike was staring at him with disgust. Dude, what the fuck? You told me she was crazy and controlling. You made her sound like a psycho ex-girlfriend. She's not psycho, said his sister quietly. She's the one who called me when you disappeared because she was worried something had happened to you. She was sobbing, terrified that you were hurt or dead. I spent hours on the phone with her trying to figure out where you might be. That's when David's facade finally cracked completely. Fine, he shouted. Fine, okay? I panicked, all right? I got scared about getting married, and I didn't know how to handle it, so I left. Is that what you want to hear? I'm a coward who couldn't face having a hard conversation, so I ran away instead. Are you happy now? The party was staring at him in shock. This was the first time in 4 years that David had admitted the truth about our breakup. But that doesn't mean our relationship was perfect, he continued desperately. Just because I posted happy things on social media doesn't mean I wasn't having doubts privately. David, I said, my voice still calm and reasonable. Having private doubts is normal. Every couple has doubts sometimes. But you didn't just have doubts. You planned an elaborate disappearance. You moved money out of our joint account. You canceled our wedding behind my back. You forged my signature on cancellation forms. You took your things from our apartment bit by bit, so I wouldn't notice. And then you spent 4 years telling people I was abusive and that our relationship was toxic. I gestured to the collage still in his hands. Those aren't the actions of someone who is just having normal pre-wedding jitters. Those are the actions of someone who chose to be cruel instead of honest. David looked around the party again, but the expressions on people's faces had shifted from confusion to disgust. Even his own friends were looking at him like they didn't recognize him. You know what the saddest part is? I continued. If you had just talked to me about your doubts, we could have worked through them together. Or, if you really couldn't handle getting married, we could have postponed the wedding or called it off like adults. I would have been hurt, but I would have understood. Instead, you chose to make me think you were dead or kidnapped. You chose to let me blame myself for months, wondering what I did wrong. You chose to let me think our entire relationship was a lie. I could see tears in David's eyes now, but I wasn't finished. And then, when you could have just owned up to making a mistake, you chose to rewrite history and make me the villain. You told people I was abusive when you know that's not true. You made me sound like a delusional ex who couldn't accept reality when you're the one who ran away from reality. The silence was deafening. David was staring at the ground, still holding the collage, looking like he wanted to disappear again. Finally, Jake stepped forward. He'd been quiet through this whole confrontation, letting me handle it my way, but now he put a protective arm around my waist. I think, Jake said carefully, that you should probably leave now. David nodded miserably and started walking toward the gate. But then he stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry. You didn't deserve any of that. I was a coward and I handled everything in the worst possible way. Thank you, I said. I appreciate you finally saying that. But, David continued, this? He gestured to the collage and the party full of people staring at him with disgust. This was cruel too. I considered that for a moment. You're right, I said finally. It was cruel. But you know what the difference is between your cruelty and mine? I told the truth. David left without another word, still carrying the framed collage of our relationship. After he was gone, the party gradually resumed, but the energy was different. People were processing what they'd just witnessed, and conversations kept coming back to the David situation. Several people apologized to me for believing his version of events or for not supporting me more after the breakup. His sister came over to me privately and said, I'm so sorry. I knew David's story didn't add up, but I didn't want to cause family drama by questioning it. What he did to you was unforgivable. His friend Mike was even more direct. I feel like an asshole for believing him. He painted you as this crazy, manipulative person, and I just took his word for it. I'm sorry. But the most satisfying conversation was with David's coworker, who pulled me aside near the end of the party. Just so you know, she said, David's been trying to get promoted at work, and part of the evaluation process involves character references and reputation in the community. After tonight, well, let's just say his reputation has taken a bit of a hit. People don't like being lied to, especially about something this serious. As people started leaving, many of them stopped to thank me for the entertainment and to congratulate me on handling that so perfectly. A few people said they wished they'd had the courage to call out exes who had spread lies about them. Jake and I spent that evening cleaning up and debriefing about what had happened. He admitted he'd been worried that confronting David so publicly might backfire or make me look vindictive, but he said watching it unfold had convinced him it was exactly what needed to happen. "He's been getting away with lying about you for 4 years, Jake said. Someone needed to set the record straight. And the fact that you did it with actual evidence instead of just accusations made it impossible for anyone to dismiss." The aftermath has been interesting. Word about the party spread quickly through our social circle and beyond. David's reputation is pretty much destroyed, not just because of what he did to me, but because people realized he'd been lying to all of them for years. Nobody likes finding out they've been manipulated and used to spread someone else's false narrative. I heard through the grapevine that David moved again, this time to a different state entirely. Apparently, the social and professional fallout from the party was too much for him to handle locally. A few people have criticized me for the public humiliation, saying I went too far or that I should have handled it privately. But honestly, I tried handling it privately for 4 years. I tried taking the high road, not defending myself, letting him tell his version of events unchallenged. All that accomplished was letting him continue to lie about me and manipulate other people. Sometimes the only way to stop a liar is to confront them publicly with undeniable evidence. And sometimes people who cruelly abandon others deserve to face the consequences of their actions, even if it takes 4 years for those consequences to catch up with them. Jake and I are getting married next month. It's going to be a small ceremony with just family and close friends, people who actually know us and support our relationship. No drama, no exes, no public confrontations. Just 2 people who love each other making a commitment they actually intend to keep. And David? Well, David taught me that actions speak louder than words, that some people would rather disappear than have difficult conversations, and that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. Those are valuable lessons, even if they came wrapped in pain and betrayal. The difference is I learned from those lessons and used them to build something better. David apparently learned nothing at all. TLDR, ex-fiancé ghosted me 3 weeks before our wedding, then spent 4 years telling people our relationship was toxic and I was abusive. At my housewarming party, I gave him a framed collage of evidence showing how excited he was about marrying me right up until he disappeared, complete with timeline and social media screenshots. His lies fell apart in front of 50-plus mutual friends and family members. He finally admitted the truth, and his reputation is ruined. Sometimes petty revenge is the only thing that works.